welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're watching this talk from today. So my hope here today is to get you excited enough about this topic that you're going to want to pursue more analysis stuff, especially in regards to incident response, long after the 30 minutes that we have together. So let's jump right into it. What are we going to cover? We're going to start off with ignorance and the importance of analysis. And you're probably thinking, what? Deer in headlights, ignorance. I'm supposed to know everything. Well, we'll talk about that here in just a second. Then we'll talk about what is analysis. A lot of times you're going to see in incident response and security in general, we use the same term to mean different things. And so I want to level set a little bit on what that really involves. And then, sometimes analysis, we like to dive in and we like to just kind of go wherever things take us, right? And that's a natural tendency for those that are analytical. But sometimes a little process might help. So I'm going to give you some suggestions on how you can kind of corral that that analysis process so that you're not running down a gajillion rabbit holes and not achieving what you want. And then last but not least, I'm going to leave you with security critical thinking. It is so important to the analysis process that we don't forget that because we have to make sure that our final theory is a sound one and that we are making the right calls when it comes to our analysis. And then last but not least, when I have you hooked enough on this process and analysis in general, I left you with a bunch of resources. This is kind of the short version of a longer workshop I do. And so there's a lot of other things we cover in analysis, malware analysis, reading logs, all that kind of stuff. And so you'll have that with you and you can kind of explore on your own. All right. So real quick, as Lo said, I do like to teach on my spare time as well. So I like to just sum up my kind of background, and I've been doing this a long time. I've been through a lot of painful exercises in security. So one of my goals is to share what I've learned in the hopes that I can make some things a lot easier for others. And I hope to kind of make that infectious so that we all share as we go along. And the more we share, I think the easier things get for security in general. So let's make it less painful for all of us. And this topic in particular can be kind of painful if you haven't done it before. And so let me expand on that and what I mean. So ignorance. Let me give you a little bit of background. The true inspiration for this talk is to get you thinking. Literally, that's it. Excuse me. When we get into automation, especially in security operations centers, the tools we use push us to push buttons, right? And then we stop thinking. We just shut down our brain. We just start kind of, just assuming way too much is where I'm going. There are cases, this causes us to miss things. And I hope today to make a compelling argument that we should really embrace ignorance, encourage that analysis, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm hearing that phrase a whole lot more these days, which is fantastic because we have to embrace that as security analysts. We can't just always assume we know everything. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So really, let's dive into how to apply scientific theory into the art of incident response. So why this is important, what got me really started down this path, I read this book and it's called Ignorance and How It Applies. Get the full title here. Hold on just a second. Ignorance and How It Drives Science, and it's by Stuart Firestein. It has absolutely nothing to do with security, but it does have everything to do with the importance of scientific theory and how you can apply that as you're trying to make your hypothesis in a scientific situation. And that got me thinking, and especially it starts off with this quote, and I just love it. Analysis is a lot like trying to find that black cat in a dark room, right? Especially when there's no cat. You feel like you're just kind of feeling into the ether and trying to find your way around, and you're like, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. And it's really uncomfortable, trust me, right? I'm sure you've been there. If you've done it before, it is not comfortable, but it's important to start somewhere. And that's where ignorance really comes in. So, oops, went too fast there. Ignorance is the absence of fact, understanding, insight, or clarity about something, right? We need to embrace that ignorance when we come with to security analysis, because we don't always know everything, and sometimes we never get the answers we're pursuing. So we have to keep that in mind, and I want to encourage that in any endeavor you try to follow in security. But then it's this other flip side problem. We analytical people tend to get paralyzed because we want to analyze everything, right? We want all the data, right? And that's ambitious, and I love it, but it's also very difficult to come up with a sound conclusion when you do that. So let's talk about some ways that we might be able to get around that. First, though, I want to talk a little bit about what does analysis really mean to incident response. So if you're not familiar with this, this graphic here is the NIST 4-part incident response process. And it's in the link there. It's in the 800-61 document. And it's pretty standard for adoption in a lot of security operations centers. And you'll see right here in phase 2, detection and analysis is called out directly there. But I would argue that analysis is involved in every single step of the way. You have to be able to take an objective view of what you're doing and the scope of your incident response to be able to come up with the right conclusion, if there is a right conclusion to be had. So definitely it applies to every single step. So don't just think, oh, there's only one place for analysis. You've got to be prepared. You've got to understand, where are my gaps, right? And take a really honest look at that. As well, when you get to the containment and eradication plan, is my plan the right plan? And how can I objectively look at that? And then last but not least, there's always cleanup activities after an incident. So you want to make sure to, there again, you're coming up with a sound theory, and that it's, these are the right things to prioritize your precious time on. Okay, so then what justifies good analysis, right? First off, you've got to have context for security events. You can't just take a point in time alert, which is usually what starts our analysis journey, especially in incident response, and say, oh, this thing always means this thing, because that thing could be caused by a number of things. So you have to have that context around that event. You have to understand what happened before it, what happened after it, and what other things might have been going on around that. And so that takes a lot of practice and patience to kind of weed through that. You also have to accept that you don't know everything. This is hard for a lot of folks, but it's true, right? Every day, I've been doing this a long time. Every day I learn something new, literally. And it's just astounding that, things continue. You think, oh, well, that'll fix itself. Well, sometimes it doesn't fix itself. So you can't assume that you're automatically, your brain goes, oh, yeah, it's always this. Nope. Let's apply some more analysis to that. You want to understand that there's more than one way to analyze things. I always liken this to the old-fashioned car wreck, right? If I'm standing on a street corner and I witness an accident in the middle of the intersection, I'm viewing the accident from one angle. I'm going to have a perception of what happened there. But if I'm standing on the other corner, I'm going to have that different viewpoint and observe different things that might have led into that accident and provide helpful information to really understanding what happened there. And the same thing goes with analysis. Your colleague over in the SOC, whether they're sitting right across from you or whether they're virtual, they can also provide that good context. They might have some, hey, I saw that in a different incident, or actually it turned out to be this, or whatever. That collaboration is just critical. And it's really good to have that diversity of thought. And then last but not least, we have to have a little humility. You may be bold enough to make that hypothesis, and I encourage that, because having, making that first bold step to create that hypothesis is important. But you have to be able to accept that you may be wrong, and that there's other evidence you didn't consider or didn't know about, and that when others kind of help you make that final conclusion, that you can accept that feedback. And that goes with a lot of things, but security analysis is critical. All right. So how do you like to do analysis, right? There's so many ways to do it. And again, people do things differently. So we have to be able to feel comfortable in, if you like to see things this way, you go do things that way, and not just follow, a straight line of checklists, although some people like that. People laugh at my first bullet when I say spreadsheets. I'm a visual kind of deep dive person. And so when I can manipulate data in a spreadsheet, I'm very excited, because I can start to see patterns. That's how I look at things. I see a cluttered desk, and I can find that one thing in that big cluttered desk that I want, right? Same kind of thing with a log file in a spreadsheet, or anything in a spreadsheet, pretty much. Some people like to dive into, like a Splunk or whatever tool it is, and do text searches, right? They're really, really good at that. I'm really, really horrible at that, because I never get the language quite right. I'm that person that writes that query that's like, oh yeah, you just bogged down the whole system. Don't do that. So, it just takes a lot of practice. And some people are really good at that. So that's perfectly fine. Some people like trend graphs. I also like graphs. Graphs visually help you kind of hone in on key points, and tell you, maybe I need to look over there. And they're very quick. Data lakes, having all the data in one place, again, can be another way, right? And it can be very useful, because you have the ability to pull all that context in, but it's also a learned skill. It's not just something you're in and run off to right away. My other one is, do you like reading log files? Go straight to the source, right? That's one thing we often forget, because we're like, oh, we have this big fancy sim tool or whatever it is that you use. Go right to the source sometimes. That's going to give you the context you may need, because it may not come across in some of the tools that we use to filter. So I'll talk more about that as we go. Okay, so again, you may like the Wild West and trying to do all this analysis with all kinds of crazy things. And then you may also need a little process to kind of keep you in line and keep your framework going, so that you can stay on track. So let's talk about that. In security operations, or security analysis specifically, it's very critical to know the tools, or sometimes they're called controls, that give you that log data that you're getting, that causes those events and those alerts to pop. Understand how they should work, right? So I always use the old, okay, here's a firewall. Firewalls are supposed to be gateways. Great, I understand that. But then know how they're implemented too, right? Because sometimes that's what gets us in security events, is that they're not configured the way we think they are, and they don't operate the way we think they should. So make sure you know both of those. Know your enemy. Threat modeling is so important. Threat intelligence is so important, and relevant threat intelligence to your organization. Make sure you know who's after you and what tactics that they use. Then go play with MITRE, right? And understand that the MITRE attack matrix is another super valuable tool in understanding how these groups will likely try to get in, and what they can take advantage of, and marry that up to the tools and controls that you have. Follow the breadcrumbs. Don't be comfortable with just that one event that you get. Go to the tools themselves, again, pivot through them, follow the trail. Can you figure out where the attack started and where it ended? And we'll talk about a useful tool for that here in a couple slides. Also know how to read those logs. The logs are your source of truth, and they're going to get you the most honest answer of what happened when something does happen. And how you do that, there are all kinds of logs out there. Of course, they're all in different formats, even though they say they're in the same format. Go to the, open source. Google's your friend. Somebody's most likely plowed through this before and can help you kind of parse what that means. Vendor resources are also a gold mine to understand what's going on in logs. Also, we want to maybe start with some regular points, right? Some go-to type tools. When I see this event, I'm going to go see what I can find in this tool kind of thing. And then maybe you'll apply some other steps to it. So you go to the logs, you go to OSINT or open source intelligence, what's available. There's a ton of stuff out there. Maybe somebody's seen this thing before, whatever. Maybe you have specific threat intelligence data, whether you have a threat intel team or you have vendor sources or a combination of those, or you have somebody that just happens to like to watch news feeds. There may be something there that can help you kind of put things together. Google, best tool on the planet. IOCs, indicators of compromise. If you think you could be under attack by whatever enemy, go start looking for indicators. We are getting so fantastic about being able to publish that information anymore. Although Lapsus with this whole Okta thing and their little outbreak, they're ones that are kind of still foiling us, but it's, we are publishing them more early, more often. And if you haven't looked up Lapsus and Okta, you should be following along at home because that's pretty exciting stuff. And then last but not least, bump it up against the kill chain. You got all this stuff. Let's try and figure out where the attack is. And this is the kill chain from Lockheed Martin. If you haven't seen this before, it's kind of old school. MITRE's now the latest and greatest, but it's short enough that you can actually put it in a slide, and it still works, right? So the kill chain is really how an attack typically evolves. Doesn't mean it always has to go through all of these steps, but you can kind of pinpoint somewhere in there where you think it is. Unfortunately, by the time you catch things in a SOC, a lot of times it's way back here at command and control and stuff's going out your, or attempting to go out your network. But if you can start building better rules as you get better at analysis to detect things up here, at the reconnaissance or the weaponization stages, you're going to have a better detection and response capability. And that's what this is all about, right? You want to feed into that process in a SOC and you want to improve it. And the only way you can do that is to get better at analysis. All right. So, and then maybe another type of process you can use, I mentioned threat modeling. DREAD is another old school type threat modeling tool. It was published out of Microsoft many, many moons ago, but it still works. And these are just, this is what DREAD stands for: damage, reproducibility, exploitability, number of affected users, and discoverability. And why that's important is because when you find something, if you can kind of try and rate it, like, okay, I'm going to give it a rating for each of these sections and see, is this really impactful? And could this be really bad? This is a quick way for you to kind of framework your analysis to say, this could be super bad. I need to, really escalate this. And so if you can answer all those questions, even just slightly, a little bit, it's going to help you kind of prioritize that particular alert in the right way. And I love this. This is just another kind of DREAD. It's another type of threat modeling framework. Unfortunately, I will just say that the site that I got this from is no longer exists. It looks like this project is long gone, but luckily I captured this because it's very simple, right? It's the same thing. What have you observed? I have an alert. Then figure out where it fits in this realm of other contexts that I'm looking at. And then decide, make a decision. What's your hypothesis? Is this really bad or is it not really bad? And then put that feedback into your loop, right? Otherwise, you might need to act. Very simple, straightforward, easy to follow, and it's a good guidance for you as you go down your analysis path. All right, we're getting towards the end of my content, but this is probably the most important part here coming up. So I talk about the 3 C's of incident response because I think it's important that we not only focus on the analysis part, which is huge, but then you've got to be able to communicate it. And as you know, if you're new to cyber or you're in cyber and you're just trying to grow your skills, these are so critical overall to incident response that I have to point them out. Now, we're not going to dive into communication and control of the message today, but I'll just leave it here and say, if you can't articulate what you found in your analysis to your management, or so that they can understand it enough to translate that to whatever senior level management or board that you need to communicate to, you're failing at analysis. So that's another important aspect of analysis and a skill. It takes time. Trust me, it's not easy. And I spend all day trying to translate stuff so that it makes sense to my audience so that they can understand the true impact of what you're working on, right? So that's the goal. And then control the message during incident response simply means you want to be the source of truth when it comes to incident response. And if your communication's terrible, and then you're not controlling the right message, because you're not getting your message across that this is really bad and here's why. I think Log4j was a super great example. And if you're not familiar with Log4j, look that up. There was so much excellent communication material published at such an early stage of that it just really helped the incident responders kind of be able to take that and run with it and show, here's the importance of this particular vulnerability, and we really need to act. Okay, so I am going to focus a little bit more in depth here on critical thinking, because it is what underlies all of our analysis, whatever we do. So let's dive into that. So this is particularly tailored to security, and I found this eons ago in something called the OSSTMM, the Open Source Testing Methodology Manual, and it's an open source pen testing book, basically manual. And I believe it's still out there. I didn't put the link on my slide, so hit me up in Slack. I'll make sure you can get that link. It's really good. It has, it's all about pen testing, but it's got this one lovely little section that's called critical security thinking. And so the next couple of slides are taken directly from that because I didn't want to modify it in any way, shape, or form. It's so good because it helps kind of focus you on what am I trying to get at here. So as it says, it's a term for using logic and facts to form an idea. Right. So you got to take a step back and get rid of that automated easy button and go, okay, I got to think here. And that idea that you come up with, it can be an answer, it can be a conclusion, or it can be a characterization, right? And they all have different things that will guide your actions forward. So when you have that answer or conclusion that you've made, you might go, all right, which one makes the most sense? What makes the most sense here that I would apply to my particular organization or situation? And then likely you'll come up with that characterization, right? You'll have kind of this, I think it's this, but here's what I need to go verify to make sure it's true or not, that kind of thing. So critical thinking helps you address those contradictions you're going to encounter and look for alternate consequences. So it's very, very important that you apply that. And it's just critical thinking, but it's applied to security specifically. So let's go talk about the 6 steps. What you want to do is build your knowledge of the target, right? And this can specifically apply, it applies nicely to forensics, but honestly, it applies to anything we do with analysis. So build your knowledge of the target. What are the facts that I have in front of me for this very event? And they may be scarce, and that's fine. But it'll, again, as you go through this kind of format, you'll go, oh, okay, I get that now. Determine the global level of experience. Again, Google is your friend. Somebody out there likely has seen this indicator, this alert, this IP address, whatever it is, and that activity coming from it before. Go figure that out. Even if it's talking to your fellow security analysts, go ask them. Then this one's the next critical step. Determine any bias or ulterior motives in your own analysis. Wait, what? We're biased? No, that can't be. Hey, we're human. We're human. We have bias no matter what, no matter how neutral you think you are. And also we make mistakes. We have to be able to work with that, right? Especially in security, we're not always going to be 100% right. Translate that jargon. Remember I said analysis can be used in different terms and formats. We do that all the time with security terms. So ask questions when you don't understand, like if somebody's throwing something at you, what does that mean? You know, how do you use that kind of stuff? This one is specific to, this next one is kind of specific to forensics. You know, calibrate that test platform, in meaning, you know, when you make an image, you want it to be clean so that you're not muddying up your analysis. Same thing goes here. Whatever you're doing, make sure you don't have other extraneous junk. Make sure that you've got a clean slate. All your evidence goes into one place and you're good to go. And then assure that you get the most direct answer. What? Don't rely on GUIs to give you the answer you want. Go to the logs themselves. That's always, you know, the right answer is in the source of truth itself. Okay, and I'll highlight target very quickly because this is another excellent example of where analysis went horribly wrong. And I use it over and over again. People are tired of hearing about it, but it's a good reminder. The attackers were in the target network in September of I think it was 16. No, yeah, I think it's 2016. Sorry, I forgot the year. And if you haven't read this full analysis, I highly recommend it. The Department of Justice knocked on the door of Target after, you know, what is it, 4 months, 5 months? That is bad, and you don't want that in your SOC. You don't want the Department of Justice telling you have an incident. You want to be able to do that, and it's all because they were getting these alerts from this brand new spanking new tool that they got, and they're like, "Oh, that's fine. We don't need it. That doesn't mean anything. We'll just turn them off." If they'd listened, if they'd had one SOC analyst that had said, "Hey, this is bad," that probably could have all been prevented. All right, so now to really kind of wrap this up, how do I start? Where do I start? Ask questions. It's that easy, right? If your gut's telling you something doesn't seem right here, ask questions. You have permission. I'm giving you permission. Assume you don't know everything, you know, and here's just some, you know, generic ones to get you started. What are the facts? How could those facts have come about? What are the methods? Where did the incident start? Do you have patient zero? Those types of things. So roll right through those things. And you know, there's a natural flow. Once you get good at this, you'll start to have those kind of in the back pocket. Did I answer all these questions, kind of thing? And then I'll leave you with, again, there's just a ton of resources here to read through, and a couple good books that if you're interested in that particular topic, you might want to look at. This has a lot to do with malware analysis and reverse engineering. And then that's it. That's my talk. So remember, ignorance is okay. Think about how you define analysis. A little process is also okay. If you know, don't let that scare you, and use critical thinking always. And with that, again, I hope I achieved my goal. Thank you. I will be in the Slack channel for any questions.